recording of the death of Isaac and his burial by both Esau and Jacob, Moses gives us the generations of Esau. Now remember, Moses is the one who wrote the book. Moses gives us the generations of Esau before turning to focus on Jacob and his descendants. This is because it's going to provide a contrast. Very short focus on Esau, very long focus and hopeful focus on Jacob. The reason we're given Esau's descendants, even though he was outside of the promise, he was condemned, is the same reason we were given Ishmael's descendants. Ishmael was a child of Abraham who God had given a temporal, physical blessing to, and Esau was a child of Jacob who also was given a temporal, physical blessing. That's all they got. Thus, the generational information here shows the fulfillment of God's physical, temporal blessing to them. And what we're going to realize is seeking God just for those things, seeking God for our best life now, is not going to satisfy. So this genealogy is to be understood in contrast with God's spiritual and eternal blessing to those who inherit the promise. That's us. When Esau and Jacob were still in the womb of Rebekah, God said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided, and one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. This is obviously something that Jacob would remember, but he must be wondering, it's not happening. Ever since Jacob had received the blessing from his father, it would seem that it was actually the other way around. If he couldn't see the purposes of God and his working in his life, forming him more and more into his image, and was focused only on all the prosperity and the things that other people were getting, he would wonder if God had any favor upon him at all. At the time of his return to Canaan, after 20 years, Esau was already far more powerful and far more established than Jacob was. This was evidenced by the 400 men Esau brought with him when he met Jacob, and his initial refusal of Jacob's gift because he said he already had plenty. Jacob had only begun to build his family 12 years before, and was accumulating possessions for only the past 6 years. Upon his return to Canaan, Jacob greatly feared Esau, and he actually addressed Esau as his Lord and he as Esau's servant. That is a far cry from the blessing or what God had revealed to Rebekah when they were still in the womb. Who's serving who here? And then when he came before Esau, he bowed down 7 times, representing a complete submission before Esau. So we see here, you kind of wonder, if you look at the surface, you go, the blessing's reversed. The passage this morning reveals the speed and success in the development of the nation coming from Esau, in contrast with the nation coming from Jacob. It's a physical versus spiritual blessing. We will learn that success must not be measured by temporal, physical things, but by that which is spiritual and eternal. God may give us temporal things as an encouragement to us because we're weak and we need them. We need a holiday. I'm thankful for a holiday. But my hope isn't in it. So again, we will learn that success must not be measured by temporal, physical things, but by that which is spiritual and eternal. which involves suffering and requires patience and perseverance. We will see, that's how God does his work. That's how we know we're favored by God. So although on the appearances it looked like Esau was, he wasn't. It was Jacob, because God was doing an internal work. God's will is not to build our power and possessions, but to build our faith, which is more precious than gold, which is more precious than the most valuable of all possessions. So follow along with me as I read from Genesis chapter 36 to verse 1 of 37. There's going to be a lot of names here, but there is some commentary in here that you can pick up some very important keys, very important information from. At the very least, let this make it very clear just how prosperous and successful Esau was while Jacob was still struggling. These are the generations of Esau, that is Edom. Esau took his wives from the Canaanites: Adah, the daughter of Elon the Hittite; Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon the Hivite; and Basmath, Ishmael's daughter, the sister of Nebuoth. And Adah bore to Esau Eliphaz. Basmath bore Reuel, and Oholibamah bore Joash, Jalam, and Korah. These are the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. Then Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the members of his household, his livestock, all his beasts, and all his property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan, and went into a land away from his brother Jacob, for their possessions were too great for them to dwell together. The land of their sojournings could not support them because of their livestock. So Esau settled in the hill country of Seir. Esau is Edom. These are the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons: Eliphaz, the son of Adah, the wife of Esau; Reuel, the son of Basmath, the wife of Esau. The sons of Eliphaz were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. Timnah was a concubine of Eliphaz, Esau's son. She bore Amalek to Eliphaz. These are the sons of Adah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Reuel, Nathan, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. These are the sons of Basmath, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, the daughter of Zibeon, Esau's wife. She bore Esau Jewish, Jalam, and Korah. These are the chiefs of the sons of Esau: the sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau, the chiefs of Teman, Omar, Zepho, Kenaz, Korah, Gatam, and Amalek. These are the chiefs of Eliphaz in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Adah. These are the sons of Reuel, Esau's son. The chiefs Nathan, Zerah, Shamath, and Mizah. These are the chiefs of Reuel in the land of Edom. These are the sons of Basmath, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Oholibamah, Esau's wife. The chiefs Joash, Jalam, and Korah. These are the chiefs born to Oholibamah, the daughter of Anah, Esau's wife. These are the sons of Esau, that is, Edom, and these are their chiefs. These are the sons of Seir, the Horite, the inhabitants of the land: Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anah, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These are the chiefs of the Horites, the son of Seir in the land of Edom. The sons of Lotan were Horai and Heman, and Lotan's sister was Timnah. These are the sons of Shobal: Alvan, Manath, Ebal, Shepho, and Onam. These are the sons of Zibeon. Ai and Anna. He is the Anna who found the hot springs in the wilderness as he pastured the donkeys of Zibeon his father. These are the children of Anna, Dishon, and Holabama, the daughter of Anna. These are the sons of Dishon, Hemdan, Eshban, Itran, and Sharon. These are the sons of Izar, Bilhan, Zavan, and Akan. These are the sons of Dishan, Uz, and Aran. These are the chiefs of the Horites, the chiefs Lotan, Shobal, Zibeon, Anna, Dishon, Ezer, and Dishan. These are the chiefs of the Horites, chief by chief in the land of Seir. So just a quick interest, quite the development, quite the growth, quite the development, quite the structure we see here. Okay, we'll continue on. These are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites. Bela, the son of Beor, reigned in Edom, the name of a city being Dinhaba. Bela died, and Jobab, the son of Zerah of Bozrah, reigned in his place. Jobab died, and Husham of the land of the Temanites reigned in his place. Husham died, and Hadad, the son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the country of Moab, reigned in his place, the name of his city being Avith. Hadad died, and Simla of Masrekah reigned in his place. Samlah died, and Shaul of Rehoboth on the Euphrates reigned in his place. Shaul died, and Baal-Hanan, the son of Achbor, reigned in his place. Baal-Hanan, the son of Achbor, died, and Hadar reigned in his place, the name of his city being Pau. His wife's name was Mehetabel, the daughter of Matred, daughter of Mezahab. These are the names of the chiefs of Esau, according to their clans and their dwelling places by their names. The chiefs Timnah, Alva, Jetheth, Oholabama, Elah, Pinon, Kenaz, Teman, Mibzar, Magdiel, and Iram. These are the chiefs of Edom, that is, Esau, the father of Edom, according to their dwelling places in the land of their possession. So the first thing that strikes us is you compare this to Jacob, who's still, in a sense, establishing himself, wandering. Just last we saw him just coming back into the land of Canaan. The key verse in this passage is this: these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the Israelites. All the information we're given here shows the development and growth of the nation of Edom, the descendants of Esau, that took place far in advance of the development and growth of the nation of Israel, that would make it look like what's going on with regards to what God told Rebekah when they were both in the womb. Israel would not have a king for at least another 640 years. God's not in a rush. God's not in a rush. We have to be very careful about the expectations that we place on God, especially as it's related to those physical expectations that we have. It began with Esau taking two of his wives from the Canaanites 37 years before Jacob married Leah and Rachel. Jacob married Leah and Rachel when he was 77 years old. Esau married his wives, started marrying the two Canaanite wives when he was 40 years old. He then married a third wife, who was Ishmael's daughter, about 7 years before Jacob married Leah and Rachel. They all bore sons to Esau while he was still in the land of Canaan. This means the nation of Esau began more than a generation before the nation of Jacob. And we know from going through the life of Jacob that God used those intervening years to do what? To do an internal work in Jacob, focused on what? Building his faith. They were not wasted years. They were incredibly valuable years. And with a spiritual perspective, we could see God's favor on Jacob as opposed to Esau. At the time when Jacob was returning, Esau had already established a home in Seir. After Jacob's return, he had moved his family back to Canaan, possibly to be with his aging father, possibly with their reuniting with Jacob just simply to be together. So yes, he was dwelling in Seir, but it says here he came back. He was also living in Canaan. After the death of his father, it says, Esau took his wives, his sons, his daughters, and all the members of his household, his livestock, all his beasts, and all his property that he had acquired in the land of Canaan, and he returned to settle in the hill country of Seir. This would be the land that he would eventually conquer that would become known as Edom. Deuteronomy 2:12 says, "The Horites also lived in Seir formerly, but the people of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them and settled in their place, as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave to them." The difference being is that there's about 600 to 700 years in between this period of time. We don't know exactly when Esau defeated them, but what we see is that the people were assimilated into Edom. There was intermarriage, which often would prevent any kind of uprising with the people. This defeating of them would be in fulfillment of what Isaac said in his blessing to Esau, that he would live by his sword. It's a far cry from living by faith, isn't it? He lived by the sword, not by faith. The reason Esau went away from his brother Jacob was because their possessions were far too great for them to dwell together. This was the same reason Lot and Abraham had to separate from each other as well. The land could not support them because of their livestock. However, there's a difference between Lot and Esau. Esau was not able to choose to stay in Canaan. He was not given a choice, as Lot was given. The reason being is because Jacob was to inherit the land. In fact, that was made very clear in the contrast between the blessings that Isaac gave to Jacob versus Esau. Esau was well aware of it. The land was promised by God to Jacob, not to Esau. Isaac's blessing to Esau was, quote, "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high." As such, we don't know how willing Esau was, but we do know that since it was God's will, he caused Esau to be the one that left. It was ultimately God who caused him to return to Seir, which he gave him to possess. In fact, Joshua 24:4 says specifically that God gave him that land to possess. John Calvin writes this: "It often happens that the wicked do good to the elect children of God, contrary to their own intention." This is why it is so important for us not to rely on, this supposed goodness of others. We rely on God. It is God who works in the hearts of men to accomplish his will. We can't fret over trying to appease. We saw that with Jacob, with Esau. He was trying to appease him by sending him all the gifts ahead of time. But he didn't need to do it because it was God who'd already done his work in the heart of Esau. It's exactly the same for us today. We don't need to worry about what's going on in the minds and the hearts of others. God is in control of those things. We simply need to guard our own hearts and our own minds. We trust God. We don't trust man. Our future isn't dependent on decisions man might make. Our future is dependent on the will of God. While in the hill country of Seir, the nation of Edom began to develop through the offspring of his sons. Although we do not know much, if anything, about the sons, that's not the point. We can't know. We don't know. We don't have history. It's just the volume and the extensiveness of the growth of Esau that we need to take from this. But for Israel, the names and descendants would have been known. They would have been meaningful to Israel. It would have informed them of who Esau's descendants were. It would have informed them of where their location was. And it would have informed them of what their relationship with them would be and why. It was helpful. They would know they were enemies, and they would know why they were enemies. They would know who they were, where they lived, and why they were struggling with them. It's the same for us today. We know ultimately who our enemies are, those who are enemies of the gospel. They knew how to respond. They knew they could be on their guard. However, although there's a lot that we cannot know about these names, there are at least two things that we can glean from this genealogy. First, there's the first one. It's kind of a major one. The second is a little bit less so. But first was Esau's son Eliphaz, who had a son named Teman. He was the father of the Temanites. Does that sound familiar? The name Eliphaz and Temanite. Later, a Temanite by the name of Eliphaz, likely taking his name from Teman's father, was one of Job's friends. Eliphaz the Temanite relied on his faulty understanding of God and his character and spoke wrongly about God. Job 42:7. His lack of knowledge and understanding of God caused him to falsely accuse Job of having no fear of God and being guilty of great wickedness and sin. So where did that come from? Well, he equated God's favor only with physical prosperity, and his punishment only with suffering. Oh, we've got false teachers that do that today. This isn't surprising since he was a descendant of Esau who had no regard for the blessing and promise of God, and he would have benefited from Edom's success and prosperity. He equated, because it was a physical, temporal blessing, he equated God's favor only with physical things, prosperity. However, he would learn that although God may show his favor with prosperity and he may punish with suffering, he does do those things. This was not the case with Job. It is not always the case. God is not one-dimensional. God also shows his favor to the righteous through suffering. God also shows his favor to the righteous through suffering. We have so many verses in the New Testament that tell us this. Why we can rejoice in the midst of suffering. This is because God's purposes are far beyond worldly possessions and comfort. God's purposes go beyond it. And we can apply this to Jacob. I mean, you probably haven't thought before that there's actually Job and Jacob, it's believed strongly that they lived around the same time. There is a relation here. We can apply this to Jacob, who was counted righteous by his faith. Although unrighteous Esau and his descendants would prosper, Jacob would struggle and suffer for the next 650 years. They had some encouragements, they had comforts, they had pleasures, they had things that they experienced God doing for them. But it was all in the context of their suffering, of their struggle. And it lasted 650 years. This was, and it goes beyond that, but that takes us up to King Saul. This was in accordance with the will of God for his purpose in the fulfillment of his eternal plan through Israel. So you got to ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want the temporal blessing or do I want a spiritual blessing? Physical or spiritual? Temporal or eternal? So as such, just as it was with Job, who also looked forward to eternity and expressed that confidence in the midst of his suffering, their suffering was because of God's favor on them, for he had a spiritual and eternal purpose in it that transcends the physical and the temporal. By contrast, Esau, who seemed to have had God's favor by Eliphaz's false theology, would ultimately cease to exist. They went out of existence. It talks about how life is, it's a vapor, right? Fading. Numbers 24:18 says, Edom shall be dispossessed. Sire also, his enemies shall be dispossessed. Israel is doing valiantly. Israel is doing valiantly. Obadiah, verse 10. Because of the violence done to your brother Jacob, shame shall cover you, and you shall be cut off forever. That's the end of a physical blessing without any spiritual blessing at all. This shows us that it is not the physical and temporal, but the spiritual and eternal work of God that is important. True riches are those that are spiritual, not physical. As such, God uses suffering, the loss of the physical, the loss of family, the loss of health, the loss of possessions, all things that Job experienced, to give us what? Spiritual riches, an eternal hope, which Job confidently expressed. And of course, afterwards, Job received an encouragement from God in his faith. The blessings he received after the physical did not replace his faith, his spiritual blessing. They simply encouraged him in it. So God uses suffering for our good. Romans 5:3-5 says, we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and character produces hope, and hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Suffering is hard. The struggles, they are not enjoyable, but we can go through them knowing that they're good. If you belong to God, He will use them, and He will produce something in them that is far greater than just simply going through life experiencing comforts. James 1, verses 2-4. Count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. That's the reward. We grow in holiness for the rest of our lives, and we receive perfection for eternity. And then finally, in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 3-7, blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, an inheritance, the inheritance of the promise that is imperishable, undefiled and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. That's the spiritual blessing. That's what we rejoice in. In this you rejoice, though now for a little while, if necessary, you have been grieved by various trials, so that the tested genuineness of your faith, more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor at the revelation of Jesus Christ. Perspective is everything. Perspective is absolutely everything. We must look at everything through the lens of Christ's sacrifice for us to give us salvation and the hope that we have in that. And that's what he would accomplish through Jacob, not Esau. Esau's temporary prosperity meant nothing. Jacob's eternal prosperity means everything. It's the right kind of prosperity. Jacob could not know why he was suffering. He could not know why he was struggling. And it's the same with us. A lot of times we just can't make sense of it. Job couldn't make sense of it. He asked God, and God basically said, you don't need to know. He didn't answer. So Job could not know why he was struggling and suffering while Esau was prospering. There are numerous instances in Scripture when many godly people have wrestled with this when they see the wicked prospering. Of course, we see Job had this, Job 21:7. Jeremiah expressed this, Jeremiah 12:1-2. And of course, we have Psalm 73. However, just as with Job, we do not need to know. We do not need answers. We already have it. It's because God's doing an internal work in us. His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are greater than our thoughts. We can't know, but we can trust. We can't know, but we can trust. We need to trust God that He is using it for His purposes and our good. Why? Because He said so. And what was credited as righteousness to Abraham? It's his faith. He believed God. We just simply need to believe God. A final note, or actually the second thing that we can glean, is that Eliphaz had a son named Amalek, who was born through one of his concubines named Timnah, who was a daughter of Seir the Horahite. So Amalek being born to a concubine, not a wife, and a foreigner outside of Esau's family may have made Amalek an outcast, explaining why the Amalekites became a separate nation outside of Edom and would also become a bitter enemy of Israel. So they would have had some understanding of why that was the case. This genealogy would have helped. Now, a final note from the genealogy is that there are apparent inconsistencies in the recording of his wives' names compared with Genesis chapter 26 and 28. There's possible explanations for this, but we can't analyze them here. I've got notes, we can talk afterwards. One of the inconsistencies is with the name of his second wife named Oholibamah and her father Anna. This might be the reason why Moses gave additional information about Anna by saying that he was the same Anna who found the hot springs in the wilderness as he pastured the donkeys of Zibeon his father. It seems that additional information was needed in order to be able to identify the right person. It was, as is with all information given by God, intended to provide needed clarity to Israel on who Oholibamah and her children were. where they came from, why they were their enemies. Because keep in mind, there was chiefs, there was regions, there's tribes that they would have been dealing with that were part of Edom throughout their history. Also included in this passage is a listing of the chiefs of the sons of Esau and the chiefs of the Horites who governed in the land. This reveals that the Horites were assimilated into Edom and used as part of the significant structure and organization in Edom. Remember, you go back in the passage, it keeps saying Esau is Edom. It says Edom. That Esau defeated the Horites and established Edom. So we see from this that Esau was a powerful overlord. He also wisely used people from the conquered people to be able to give them the ability to rule over their people, and that ultimately what that would do is prevent uprisings. He was a powerful overlord. He managed wisely. He was given success. Following the life of Esau and his sons, Edom continued to prosper under successive kings who reigned in the land of Edom up to Hadar during Moses' time, with regional governors that were only chiefs of Esau. That's how the passage ends. It just lists the chiefs of Esau. Only his chiefs were the ones that governed regionally. Before listing them, we come back to what I believe is the most significant part of this passage, where Moses emphasizes that they all reigned before any king reigned over the Israelites. What did the Israelites say to Samuel? So give us a king. We want to be like the other nations. Why? Because they just come through the years of the judges, constantly going through being attacked, having to have new deliverers, having to hide, not being able to, they'd grow their crops, and in would come the enemies and come and take their crops. They lived under constant fear. They wanted to be able to have a king. Why? Because they saw that the other nations, they could defend those nations. They wouldn't have to put up with that. Give us a king like the other nations. That's what they wanted. So Esau, they had kings. They had that leadership. They had that protection. Long before Israel did. So as already mentioned, there's a few reasons why this is a significant statement. First, it confirmed the foretelling that the day would come when Israel would have their own king. In fact, in the promises, in the blessing, in the promise to Abraham, to Isaac, God made it very clear that there would be future kings that would descend from them. Second, it shows the extent of the development and power of Edom, which in addition to kings includes chiefs governing different geographical areas within Edom. Significant structure. And third, which Israel had none of, but wanted. Third, it reveals the establishment and power of Esau as a nation while Israel was in Egypt, was wandering in the desert with daily dependence on God for food and protection from their enemies. They were eating manna all day. They didn't get a big table full of lots of variety of food. They had manna for 40 years. When they were conquering and acquiring their own land in Canaan, long after Esau had conquered and acquired his land in Seir, and they were living in disarray and repeated subjugation during the time of the judges until Saul was made king. What a contrast between what would appear to be incredible success and power of Esau versus the circumstances and the situation of Jacob. But Jacob was the favored one. This genealogy is re-emphasized with the repeating of it in 1 Chronicles 1:35 to 54. It's repeated just before we're given the genealogies from Adam to just before David. And the recording of King Saul, King David, King Solomon, and the kings of Judah, because Kings goes through all the kings, the books of Kings goes through the kings for the northern and the southern kingdom, whereas Chronicles just focuses on the southern kingdom after the dividing. Why? Because it was through them that the Messiah would come. It was through that line that the promise would be fulfilled. Israel's success would come later and last into eternity. And again, contrasted at the very beginning in Chronicles with the short genealogy of Esau by comparison of what was going to take place in Jacob. The point is that the life of faith is one of patient endurance, trusting God to accomplish His purposes in His timing and His way. Where have we heard that before? We have heard that before because God, in the lives of Abraham and Isaac, He was continually reminding them that they had to trust Him, His ways and His timing, because by relying on their ways and their timing, they just created a mess for themselves. So the same truth that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had to repeatedly learn was the same truth for the nation of Israel. And it is the same truth for us today. God hasn't changed. His word hasn't changed. His exhortation to us hasn't changed. Psalm 37, 1-7 says this: "Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass and wither like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart." Why? Because your desires are on the right thing. Commit your way to the Lord. Trust in Him, and He will act. He will bring forth your righteousness as the light and your justice as the noonday. Doesn't say anything about possessions there. Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for Him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. And then in Psalm 102:28, the psalmist says, "The children of your servants shall dwell secure. Their offspring shall be established before you." This Psalm 102:28 led John Calvin to write this: "There is no reason for the faithful who slowly pursue their way to envy the children of this world or their rapid rise to success. For the happiness that the Lord promises them is far more secure." Why? Because it's in Him and not the world. We need to be careful what we look to the world for. It is far better to be recipients of the blessing that is spiritual and eternal than blessing that is physical and temporal. That's the point here. We must be pursuing and finding our comfort in the right things. We must remember that if God can cause the wicked to flourish temporarily in order to use them as part of His redemptive plan, including using Esau as a warning against rejecting the grace of God, which it does in Hebrews chapter 12, then He will most certainly, and more so, cause His elect to flourish spiritually and for eternity. As such, we must not concern ourselves with why God seems to prosper the wicked while the godly struggle. We don't even need answers to all our questions in that. We just need to trust God because God has a reason and a purpose for it. which will always be for our eternal good. Of far greater value than short-term gratification by any physical blessing in this world is the spiritual blessing that comes through faith in God by patience and perseverance. It does its beautiful work. The former, the short-term gratification, leads to destruction. The latter leads to the salvation of our souls. And that's why the Apostle Peter said we can rejoice even in our struggles and suffering. We struggle. We suffer. We have the sorrow that comes with it. But we also have something that is far greater that pulls us out of the mire. And that's an eternal hope in God, who we can trust. And in that, we rejoice.